Even on a budget, quality is non-negotiable. That's why Quince is the place to score high-end essentials at 50 to 80% less than similar brands. Get your hands on buttery soft cashmere sweaters from just $60, Italian leather jackets, and so much more. And the best part about Quince, they exclusively partner with factories committed to safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing. Elevate your style without the elevated price tag with Quince. Go to quince.com/upgrade for free shipping and 365-day returns.
Millions of people have lost weight with personalized plans from Noom. Like Evan, who can't stand salads and still lost 50 pounds.
Salads generally for most people are the easy button, right? For me, that wasn't an option. I never really was a salad guy. That's just not who I am. But Noom worked for me.
Get your personalized plan today at Noom.com. Real Noom user compensated to provide their story. In 4 weeks, the typical Noom user can expect to lose 1 to 2 pounds per week. Individual results may vary.
Hiring for your small business? If you're not looking for professionals on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. That's like looking for your car keys in a fish tank. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't even visit other leading job sites. So start looking in the right place. With LinkedIn, you can hire professionals like a professional. Post your free job on linkedin.com/spoken today.
4 years ago today, a lone voice uttered the words that have since been heard hundreds of thousands of times. Hello and welcome to what was then called the Napoleonicist. It was not what could be described as the most auspicious of starts. Recorded on an iPhone in a hotel room whilst on the road doing research, in its first week, that episode ranked up maybe 100 views in its first 48 hours. 48 months later, almost 200 episodes in, nearly 400 downloads down, and a rebrand to boot, the Napoleonic Wars pod is now in the top 1.5% of podcasts across the globe. On this, the show's 4th birthday, a sea change is afoot. New talent, new ideas, new formats, new perks for patrons. But this is also a time to reflect and to continue to develop the only thing that this show has ever done well, building that Napoleonicist community around the world. Tonight, in the first installment of a new monthly feature, we bring you a State of the Union reflection on the world of Napoleonic history. We explore what has changed in the field in that time, share updates on what you need to know in terms of the developments in the realm of Napoleonic research, discuss the exciting new shows, books, and ideas that are coming your way in the near future, and enjoy the sublime and the ridiculous in the news of the content in the world of Napoleonics. This is the State of the Union of Napoleonic history. Up next on the Napoleonic Wars pod. Hello and welcome back to the Napoleonic Wars pod / channel if you're watching this online or via Patreon, and welcome to a new format that has been spearheaded by a new member of the team who I will announce in just a moment. They are describing themselves variously as scholar in residence, occasional co-host, assistant producer was the name that I suggested, and apparently that wasn't good enough, which is why we also have this whole scholar in residence thing. So, ladies and gentlemen, he, she's, theys, and thems, please welcome. I'm trying to build up the hype, if you hadn't noticed. Although, to be honest, I don't know why I'm trying to build up the hype, because frankly, I announced this on Patreon, and everybody was lovely. Then I announced this on Twitter, and nobody cared, which was deeply rude. Then we had a pre-production meeting in which I tested tech with said scholar in residence. And then said scholar in residence was deeply peevish and rude to me. Frankly, I should have sacked them on the spot. Then I tweeted about this, and again, nobody cared. Rude. Then in the midst of all of that, I got a review that said, love the show, but can you please shut up about the Napoleon movie because we're bored now? Which admittedly is fair, but you've got to understand the trauma that was induced by the Napoleon movies, so I'm vindicated. Then I went to see the Oppenheimer movie. This is going somewhere. Stay with me, folks. Then I went to see the Oppenheimer movie and tweeted that, frankly, the Oppenheimer movie did a better job of retelling the story of the life of Napoleon Bonaparte than Ridley Scott's production. Not sorry. And that did better than any of the tweets about my new scholar in residence / assistant producer / occasional co-host. I'm not sure what that tells you about social media, but probably not a good thing. I've waffled for long enough. We're using new tech to record all of this, and I can actually see my co-host behind the scenes, continuing to send me actually rude messages through the medium of the recording equipment. So, folks, if you hadn't worked it out already from the various tweets, please welcome our scholar in residence, Dr. Luke Reynolds. I'm afraid I don't have like any clappy, cheery sound effect music. I'll probably have to add that in an edit later.
Mate, you've known me for long enough to know that I keep an applause track in my head at all times for myself.
I mean, if somebody's going to call themselves scholar in residence, then I think that's probably a given, right? I am never letting you live that one down for as long as we do these.
No, that is completely valid. That is completely fair. In fairness, when I suggested it was purely for my CV. Now, you've acknowledged the title. It's become gospel.
Oh yeah, we do. We attempt to maintain the semblance of a professional show.
That's fair.
On the
That is very fair.
Some folks won't realize what the hell's going on, but we're also doing a video version of this, which goes out to patrons, and then snippets will go out on the YouTube channel as well. So if you want the video version of that, head over to Patreon, #ad, #shameless plug. But you do get the content early and you get it ad free because we've changed platforms. There's been a whole change of stuff that you guys won't notice. But basically, ever since I brought this guy on board and decided that I really needed to pay him because apparently he's going to produce decent content, but that remains to be seen. I've rejigged a lot behind the scenes, so hopefully actually you're getting a better quality of production. But if you want the video, head over to Patreon, £1 a month, and you'll get it.
The advantage is you get to see live what we're reacting to. The disadvantage is you get to see us.
Yeah, well, I mean, you probably will get fewer complaints about that, but this face, really? I mean, I've got a great face for radio and a great voice for silent movies. So read into that what you will.
I mean, if Helen was the face that launched 1,000 ships, yours is the face that dry docked at least 50.
I thought you were going to say I was the face that sunk the Spanish Armada or something. You've probably picked up that the vibe for these is going to be slightly different, but the concept is partially inspired by Luke, in the sense that the State of the Union address was on the telly because, America is full of kind of calm and reasonable political discussion right now.
The only thing, and this is going to date what day we're recording this, but the only thing apparently that Congress can agree on is that TikTok is evil.
Yes, but seemingly some people can't decide on the definition of a Chinese national if the viral videos of that poor fella from Singapore being we should move away from politics because it's deeply depressing.
We really should.
Although, having said that, there is going to be a mini-series incoming on politics, fundamentally, UK and US, but within a Napoleonic context. So looking at the qualities of presidential figures, looking at the US Constitution, looking at British politics, British prime ministers, and just kind of providing a bit of background to where all of this came from. We may end up having a right to bear arms discussion because the amendment and the concept that you need to bear a musket.
The important question is not whether you have the right to bear arms; it is whether you have the right to arm bears.
This is true. This is true. But then your country sort of got very hacked off about tea import duties, which
it's true
led to you trying to make a cup of tea through the medium of the Boston Harbor water, which didn't go particularly well.
I maintain that that throwing the tea in Boston Harbor actually helped purify Boston Harbor. Given that at that time Boston Harbor and the Charles River, was the way they filtered out all of the tanning and things like that in the Boston area, adding the tea might have actually helped.
There's an exam paper in there somewhere. The Boston Tea Party activists were proto-environmentalists.
I love it.
Discussed.
I love it. There's an urban legend that I'm genuinely not sure is true or not, but according to this urban legend, there was a time, sort of a couple of years before the United States started taking some forms of air pollution seriously, like the version of the Clean Air Act that Britain had, after the smog killed a whole bunch of people. But before that, the exhaust coming out of a Porsche in LA was cleaner than the air being drawn into the engine of said Porsche. That is the urban legend.
That's damning.
Yeah.
I think we will possibly come back to environmental degradation in due course. People will be thinking, what the hell? But you can see.
I'm just waiting for you to announce that since we've done since we've hit 1.5 million, you're going to be buying a Porsche.
Sorry, we've hit 1.5 million. We're a 1.5% show, mate. That does not make us at 1.5 million.
I apologize. Look, you
learn the stats.
I'm new to this. All right. Up until now, I've just been brought on occasionally to boost said stats. I haven't had to care about them.
Yes, well, everything changes once you're part of the management.
God help us.
God help us, indeed. Right, we should probably do some actual Napoleonic historying, I suppose.
I mean, if you must, I guess, sure.
Yeah, but people tune into this show for more than just Zack and Luke having a waffle. So we should do some proper serious stuff, although there will be hilarity and idiocy along the way. But the concept for these is that they are a new monthly feature in which we will review what's new in Napoleonic history and have a sort of more general chat about other stuff, whether it's our own personal research journeys, in order to give you kind of a look behind the scenes of what it is to write and research and teach this stuff. I'm sure there will be hashtag ads and hashtag shameless plugs for the Napoleonic and Revolutionary War Graves charity, hashtag sorry not sorry. And yes, I know the joke is laboured, but it's become part of the repertoire, so just deal with it. Why do you think I've brought in new talent? It's precisely in order to bring in new jokes and memes that we can kind of filter into the repertoire of the show.
The problem, Zach, is if a running joke, if you beat a running joke to death, it's no longer running.
There is that. But look, this is me we're talking about, and I don't know what it is to overflog something, because my yardstick is skewed by my own research with 1,200 and 1,500 lashes. So,
Yeah.
It is what it is, folks. You're just going to have to deal with it. In all seriousness, so this show went out in 2019. In that time, we've had a pandemic. We've had about 15,000 prime ministers here in the UK. We've had a change of hands in the Oval as well.
Mm-hmm.
The world's gone to hell and back again in express elevator. There have been a couple of wars. But what's changed in the field of Napoleonic history is, of course, the really important question of the day, sitting here in 2024. But seriously, if you sort of set aside developments like, look, Jeff Bezos went to the fringes of space and, big,
and unfortunately didn't stay there.
Tech. Well, no, he didn't. But that's a whole other thing. There's a podcast to be done on that another day. We'll have a production meeting after this.
Sounds good.
What has changed? And this is a tricky one to answer. My immediate response is, so on a facetious level, there are actually more podcasts. There is more discussion in this format that has come out since, and that's only a positive thing. For all that I sort of jokingly say, look, I could do without the competition here. There's also an acknowledgement that I can't beat some of this competition that's out there. So something like Napoleonic Quarterly, for example, which I would urge folks to go and have a listen to, is a stellar show, very different in format to this one. I just turn up and waffle and throw some questions at my esteemed and very learned guests and get them to salvage the content of the show. Whereas Napoleonic
sounds like you need a scholar in residence.
Oh, just shut up already. He's been insufferable. What you're seeing now, people, is what I've had to deal with via WhatsApp for a solid 3 weeks. So you're just getting a flavour of it. He's being insufferable and probably will continue to be so. But Napoleonic Quarterly, it's planned within an inch of its life.
Yeah, it is.
Quite
it really
frankly,
is.
The preparation is just mind-blowing. I'm in awe of what Alex does, and the production quality is insane. If you're wondering why have I upped the ante on this show, it's because I've listened to what Alex is doing and gone, this show sounds like it was, recorded in a cave compared to Napoleonic Quarterly. So let's do something about that. So there's that. There's Napoleon and Generals and Napoleon from John Biscardo. You've got a whole host of other shows about other things, but I think that's really good and really positive. We've had the Napoleon movie. Yes, I know I've mentioned the Napoleon movie twice within this broadcast, but I'll stop now. I promise. Well, no, I don't promise. But we've had that travesty. So in terms of popular engagement with the period, the apparatus is there for it to be higher than ever before. Does that necessarily mean that it is so? I'm not so sure. I think it's positive. But the daddy within the podcasting market was obviously Age of Napoleon. That was the case before this show got off the ground and will always remain the case. So there's always been that fantastic conduit for people to engage with this period. We've just got more voices. And that's both a positive and perhaps a negative, because then you reach kind of saturation point. And it depends what is an individual bringing to this discussion. So that's the popular market-ish. But in terms of the academic, what's changed? I suppose my initial reaction would be better access to resources, slightly. And that's kind of a partly a product. It was a move that was underway pre-pandemic, but then was obviously accelerated by the pandemic. Luke, bring meaning to this pointless waffle.
I would say that we have seen a continued, very welcome legitimization of cultural history. Sort of that level of stuff. We're going to be talking a little bit later on about one of the new sort of great examples of this. But it's not just that, it's all sorts. It's, books that I think 10, 15, 20 years ago would have been dismissed as, oh, you're just writing this for the romance market. Like you're writing this for the romance writers market or the romance readers market, are now being acknowledged as scholarship. And they always were, to be clear, but they're being acknowledged as such, right? I think, since we're on the hashtag shameless plug bandwagon, the fact that a book on the cultural memory of Waterloo won the Society for Military History's book award is a remarkable statement. To be clear, for anyone who doesn't listen, and I'm sure for anyone who doesn't know that, that's my book. And honestly, and I've said this before on podcasts, when I had Oxford submit it, my brain sort of went, okay, there's two choices here. Either this is going to be very well received. I had no thought that it was going to win the damn thing. Either it's going to be very well received, or they're going to kick me out of the Society for Military History. Because they're just going to be like, this guy is not a military historian. We've been letting him hide for long enough. This ends now. But instead,
would have been blown. It will have been a controversy on a par with like McCarthyism in the 50s. There have been Senate hearings about this.
The HUMAC, the House on Military Affairs Committee. But yeah, I think
a political history joke going on there,
God.
Folks. That if you're not familiar, apologies, you're going to have to Google it because we do not have the time on this show.
Yeah, the acronym you actually need to Google is HUAC. But yeah, I think the cultural side and with it the social side as well have both been vastly sort of brought into the field. I think we're seeing more in the way of, global history. I mean, Alexander Mikabridze is a global history of the Napoleonic Wars. Sort of not only opened that door, but broke it down with an axe.
As if he was trying to fight his way into Hougoumont Farm.
I was just thinking that exact same reference.
Little reference that you just led me to there.
Yeah.
But apologies. Nerdery aside, carry on.
Yeah, and but I've seen others as well. There's a couple of remarkable essay collections from Taylor and Francis and Rutledge that are really looking at this from multiple international contexts, and not just sort of and now the British did this, and then the French did this. It's just like, no, and I think that blends really nicely with the culture as well, because that's where these debates are happening, not with guns and balls and swords, but with actual words, and there's questions of that and what influences. So I think it's a very welcome opening up of the scholarship, and that's also paired with some.
If we ever do merchandise, guns and balls and swords has to go on a t-shirt. It just has. I don't think it quite works on a mug, but it definitely works on a t-shirt.
Guns and balls and swords. Yeah, no, I can't argue with that. Yeah, but just sort of a general opening, and at the same time, there's been remarkable continued work on sort of what we would describe as sort of the grand battles, military strategy, military tactics, digging into the deep stuff, which I think is I think
it's very telling, actually, that Evan Wilson's book, which came out last year, which was very much about sort of veteran experience post-conflict, is now regarded as quite a kind of, this is what we would expect a military history to look like kind of title. So Evan Wilson's book, Horrible Peace, it was longlisted for the Society of Army Historical Research Templar Medal. I don't think it's breaking any confidences to say we were both very surprised that it didn't make the long list. That's not to disparage the works that did make the long list. Sorry, it didn't make the short list. Thank you. Because there's some great work in there, but Evan's work is also exceptional. So I think we both expected that it was going to make the shortlist. But that's very much kind of what we come to expect, I think, now from military history, which is, believe me, and I say this as somebody who is on that kind of complex Venn diagram of military, social, and legal history, and therefore sort of doesn't really entirely fit in any one camp. And sort of the legal historians kind of look at me and go, "Oh, what are you?" The military historians sort of go, "Are you proper military history though?" And the social historians are like, "Get thee away from me, Satan." It's really welcome to see that there is much more of that kind of stuff becoming mainstream within the military history world. Because yes, don't get me wrong, the campaign studies are very interesting, but a campaign study only gets you so far if you're not looking at the people behind it. And there have been plenty of narratives of history, from Oman and Fortescue all the way through to whoever's writing the latest one. And another one seems to drop sort of every 5 minutes. And it's not to say that the campaign studies that are coming out aren't exciting. I am deeply looking forward to Rob Griffith's study of the 1808 Fletha and Vimero battles and that sort of early phase that leads to the Convention of Sintra during the Peninsular War. So, there is stuff coming out. I think Marcus Cribb is also doing a book, isn't he, on... I can't decide. Is it... So I call it the Second Battle of Oporto. He insists that it's the Second Battle of Porto. And I think he and I would probably have a fight that resembles the Minions slapping each other in Despicable Me 2 over who has it right on that. But I'm going with Oporto because that's what Rune Muir calls it. So there's my vindication. But either way, he's also doing one on that. I'm sure he'll appreciate the shout out. So, you've got a lot of decent stuff coming through. I've also just reviewed Carol Duvall's book that came out last year on the 5th Division. That was an interesting one because we don't see many divisional histories these days. Something that's far more commonplace, I think, when it comes to the First and Second World Wars, kind of look at the division as a unit and look at their service record. So really interesting to see that. And very tellingly, in the tail end of that is a lot of kind of social history stuff about, the men of these regiments and distributions of nationality, age ranges, service records, and so on. So I think the social is now regarded as integral to the military, which is good. It's long overdue, but it is good.
Do you think that that part of that, the credit for that, much like the credit for the globalization, should be laid at least partially at Alex's feet, can be laid at Ed Koss's All for the King's Shilling?
Yes. That's a very, can I just say, it's a very weird feeling to be asked a question on my own show. You did it, and I was like, oh my God, I am not used to this. Normally my guests just sit there and take the questions, because that's kind of the dynamic. And now suddenly the shoe's on the other foot.
It's a whole new world, people. It's a whole new world. In the immortal words of Paul Merton, when Angus Dayton left Have I Got News for You? Well, Daddy's dead.
Well, not yet. Look, I know you want to get your hands on this show because, according to my will, you will now inherit it. But that's not strictly speaking true, but we'll go with the joke anyway.
God.
So be careful, otherwise I will write you out of my will.
Honestly, Zach, if you ever really wanted to make sure that no one was gunning for your death, what you really need to do is add a codicil that whoever runs this podcast must also chair the NRWGC.
Oh dear Lord.
And that would guarantee that everyone preserved your life as hard as possible.
Dear God. Or they'd just hope that the NRWGC would implode and therefore kind of expedite my place on the kill list. Either is a possibility. But to get back to your original serious point, yes, Ed Koss's book was key. And by no means was Ed the only one working in kind of social Napoleonic history. Nobody's pretending that. You've got other really interesting work that was coming out at the same time. Michael Hughes's Forging Napoleon's Grande Armée was interesting, looking at similar kinds of concepts and similar theories and their applicability to the French army as opposed to the British army that Ed looked at in All for the King's Shilling. But yes, All for the King's Shilling. I think also we shouldn't forget Rory Muir's Tactics and the Experience of Battle, which was kind of an important kind of bridging step between the classic military and the social experience. You've also got books like Charles Esdale's The Peninsular War, A New History, which was kind of sitting across a little bit of social with some political and military in there. And then Charles also did a book on women in the Peninsular War, which didn't fall into kind of mainstream gender history, but nonetheless started to kind of bring to people's attention the
I would also throw in not on the gender and social, and to a certain extent the social side, but the admixture of military and politics that we all assume happens because of Clausewitz, but actually was quite rare. It was sort of one or the other for a long time. I want to shout out Christine Haynes's Our Friends the Enemies and the remarkable work of Beatrice de Graaf. And I can't think of all the books that she's written, but a lot of them sort of set the tone for that. So I think those as sort of that wonderful synesthesia of sort of, post-Napoleonic military political synthesis, both in terms of scholarship, but also in terms of what was happening on the ground. The synthesis is in both places.
Yeah, I wonder if political history is enjoying a little bit of a resurgence through the work of people like Beatrice and Alex.
I think it is.
In that there's been a lot of, because we've quite rightly identified this sort of yawning chasm of a gap in our understanding of ordinary people, which is what has engendered the push for social history. Actually, that's led to a shift away from inverted commas traditional military and traditional political, partly because a lot of that was tied up in grand narrative. And I think with people like Beatrice and Alex, bringing the two parts together with that third kind of interaction with the social element, actually we're getting much more kind of rounded histories that are fundamentally quasi-political military because they are telling the story, and the big overarching narrative has to bring in the political and the military influences. Of course it does during this period. You can't escape the war in Napoleonic Wars. But nonetheless, because it's integrating the I know that there's a profound thought for people, right? You can't escape the war in the this is why we've got a scholar in residence, clearly.
No, but I think you make a good point. It's sort of not longue durée but wide durée, I guess. Is that sort of thing. We're slowly expanding width ways. The Venn diagram is experiencing mission creep. Let's put it that way.
Yes.
The Venn diagram has taken its inspiration from the borders of British India and is perpetually expanding.
Oh, Christ. There's a reference that is borderline problematic.
Well, here's the thing, right? No, I'm not saying that they were right to keep expanding. I'm just saying that they did. That's a historical fact. Just like it's a historical fact that among the military, those sorts of campaigns were known colloquially as butcher and bolt. It's that sort of thing. And that the fact that I've dropped that as the second point should tell you exactly how I feel about all of this. But yeah,
I think to somebody who's recently begun their research on the history of the British Empire in India and the way in which the white people treated their native, as they called them, regiments. And we'll get into where I'm at with that in due course. But it is very, very telling that if you want records on all of the white people that served in the East India Company Army, you have plenty to go on. If, however, you want any details on the sepoys, lots of luck. If you want casualty returns for white people, you're fine. If you want casualties for the bulk of the East India Company Army, now, my friend,
you're a different word beginning with F. Yeah,
you are indeed. But yeah, we'll come back to that in due course. But I think this is a good point for you to feedback on the Consortium of the Revolutionary Era Conference organised by Alex Migbaridze. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to be there for reasons that people have heard about already. We don't need to continue to dwell on that. But tell me how it was, because I had planned to be there and had to pull out, which was irritating but essential. But I gather it was a good show.
It was a superb conference. I mean, CRE is always a lot of fun. It's a great size for a conference. Everyone fits in one room comfortably for a dinner. There's plenty of people to chat to. It's great. Yeah, it was superbly organized by Alex Migbaridze for LSU Shreveport. And I also want to shout out Sue Marchand for LSU itself, the main campus in Baton Rouge, who worked together to put this together, to put the whole thing in line. It was really, really superbly organized. Couple of interesting sort of hiccups on sort of, do we mean the second floor? Do we mean the mezzanine? But other than that, really, really fantastic. They fed us to a remarkable extent. That Southern hospitality thing really did kick in. Superb food over, I don't know. So for those listeners of yours who are not academics, the general rule is you get maybe one dinner, and maybe a dinner and a lunch if you're very, very lucky. We had 2 dinners, a dessert reception, and a lunch. All wonderfully catered, all with good Southern food. Couple of surprises on my end. I won't lie. I'm still not sure how you can white rice spicy, but they managed it. Yes, Zach, you had a question.
I have a very important. This is the point that we've reached at this show. I'm now having to put my hand up in order to ask questions. How the scales of power have tipped against me.
Welcome to the Pod. Our guest today is Zack White. I'm sorry. Please continue.
Hello and welcome to the Napoleonic Wars pod, where Zack is being held hostage. Um, I was desperately hoping to time that so that you would spit out your tea.
No, not
as you were
quite.
taking a swig
I
there.
have far too much respect for it.
Well, yes, unlike your ancestors.
Yeah, no argument.
But the important question, I mean, this was meant to be a gaffe, not like an extended, more a comment than a question.
Oh, no.
The quality of the biscuits. This is the important question. How were the biscuits during the refreshment break?
All right, so here is that moment where the cultural dissonance kicks in. What definition of biscuits are we going with?
Oh, dear Lord. Obviously not ship's biscuit.
I'm not asking for ship's biscuit, but biscuit in the South is what almost it's more of a bread product than what we would define what Americans would define as a cookie, right? A biscuit is something you have with gravy in the South. Zack I encourage everyone to go over to YouTube just to see his expression. This expression that has been seen.
Snap. Where is
these?
Have you not watched the Great British Bake Off? Granted,
I'm with you on this one. I love a really good biscuit. My go-tos, and I'll probably be judged by this, are chocolate digestives. I'm a big fan of those.
Faithful.
So I'm with you. There were no sort of biscuits along those lines, which was unfortunate. The other thing I will say, since we are sort of picking the most minor of nits, is it took them a little too long, and this wasn't Alex and Sue, to be clear, this was the hotel. It took them a little bit too long to realize that when we asked for that people would want tea, and it wasn't going to be cold sweet tea. They wanted actual tea bags.
Who serves tea cold?
It's the South again,
what
mate.
Is this
it
one?
is.
What is this?
I know. It is served cold and sweetened. I mean, I've had this before, right? When Alex very kindly invited me down to LSU Shreveport to give a talk there, which went like gangbusters. It was amazing. The Knoll Library is incredible. I went to the cafe with him in the morning. We got king cake because it was right after Mardi Gras, which was delicious. But when I asked for tea, they sort of pointed me to this giant cooler, and I'm like, no, I want the actual tea. And it took them about a minute and a half to find a tea bag somewhere in the cafeteria for me.
Did they have to sort of brush the dust off of it first?
I think they might have. Yeah, I was very glad that it was individually sealed. I will say that. I went to college in Ireland, so I have many years of experience. Excuse me, of the sort of big box full of unwrapped tea bags. Usually two sealed together. They're square. You pop them open. You drop them in. And if you're making a teapot, you grab like 3 sets of 2 and drop those in. So I'm very used to that type of tea. But in this case, I was very, very grateful that there was an individually sealed bag, because I don't think it would have worked otherwise.
Did they?
No. So here's the thing, right? Because it's a catering place, all coffee machines, all big industrial coffee machines have a hot water spout.
Okay.
So that was fine.
The situation is saved.
The situation is indeed saved.
We should talk about like actual ideas and papers that came out of the conference.
I mean, if you want to. I just want to do one more shout out, which is that the final night banquet also had period music. There's an LSU grad student by the name of James Lyndon Hogg, and he and his father dressed in costume, fiddle and guitar, and played vintage music, period music. It was superb. It was really, really good fun. In terms of actual ideas, I mean, if we're going to go there, we had keynotes from David Blackburn on Germans in the Enlightenment, in the Industrial Revolution, and in that general sort of CRE era. We had Elizabeth Cross on the French East India Company, the overlooked one. And we had Darren McMahon on the idea of equality in the revolutionary era. And
all of those are interesting, and I'm now pissed that I didn't get to attend. But carry on.
They are very, very good. Blackbourne was I mean, to no one's surprise, was sort of gave a masterclass in how to give an entertaining keynote. Elizabeth Cross was great in terms of just, here's something that we forget existed, but was kind of important at the time. And then Darren McMahon sort of went into, and I do not mean this disparagingly, but it was much more of an intellectual history, right? He was looking at sort of where these ideas come from and where they're emerging. And it was utterly fascinating. We had 2 excellent roundtables on Napoleonic memory and pop culture. One of which Zack, in fact, organized and couldn't make. In fairness, we did replace him.
If you're watching this, this is why I look thoroughly. Yeah, I'll be delicate about it. Fudged off.
No, that's fair. That's very fair.
I wasn't there. But yes, you got a much better replacement. In fairness,
we replaced him with Beatrice de Graaf, who
wins the vote.
Yeah, it was spectacular.
Conceivable way.
Yeah, and we had Alex chairing it. So in effect, we had 4 panelists because it was myself, Severin Anger, Beatrice de Graaf, and Alex Mikabridze. And sort of, there was genuinely a moment where it became a dialogue between Alex and Beatrice, and we were just sitting there, just going, "Yeah, no, this is fine. Just keep going. This is brilliant. No argument whatsoever." A couple of papers.
I've been at that point on this show. I know that feeling where you just sit back and go, "You know what? This is easy now. I'm just going to leave you to it."
Yeah, I will never forget a friend of mine in grad school telling me the best way to pass a dissertation defense was to get your advisor and your readers talking to each other and then just sit back. And yeah, it kind of felt that way. I do want to shout out a couple of papers just for sort of interesting approaches to our grad students that I really do think needs to be pushed. One is Laura Williamson from the University of South Alabama, who gave a superb paper, and this is the title here: Sexual Debauchery and Orientalist Desires, French Fetishization of Algerian Women and the Harem, which was a fascinating piece and really, really worked very, very well with portrait painting analysis that she was doing there, and sort of contrasting that, and it was really, really an excellent paper. The other grad student
interested in that,
yeah.
Because when you look at, so I'm really interested in kind of that developing, as you can imagine now, questions around developments of notions around race and racial prejudice, but also that transition that we go to from initially nobody obviously caring too much about the integration of inverted commas Europeans with inverted commas natives. If you look in the early days of what's happening in India, genuinely nobody cares. Like literally. In fact, the men, being frankly men in this period of time, decide that they're going to embrace the concept of polygamy during this period, and then proceed to have like several wives, which they can embrace in India because of the cultural distinction. So, the Europeans are not concerned with embracing the idea of having a relationship with somebody from India. And that kind of the notion of fetishization of what they at the time would have used, would have referred to as the exotic, is very much a thing.
I enjoy the exotic.
It's better than my Wellington impression.
That is very fair. That is very, very fair. But yeah, no, it really did touch on all of those, and really fascinating from the sort of like the obsession in the harem, and sort of like, ooh, all of these women naked together, ooh, all the way through to sort of like sort of depicting Moroccan and Algerian men as sort of worried because there were all these fancy new white people in uniform hanging around, and not worried about sort of losing their country, but worried about losing their wives. it was really, really good, just really spectacular. I also want to shout out, to no one's surprise, Séverine Angers, of the Napoleonic Revolutionary War Graves Charity and of the University of York, for her superb paper, Grasping the Laurels, British Soldiers, Memorialization, and the Military Hero in the Napoleonic Era. Really, really fantastic. Just it's so nice to see. This is, something else, again, that sort of cultural history coming in. The use of memorials and tombstones as bits of cultural history, as sources, right? And being able to read into that and do sort of a deep text analysis of that to illustrate. And she's lucky enough in many cases to have not just the memorials, but the family letters that went back and forth to help design them. So she tells this incredible story of how, sort of the balance between grief and heroism, and where people like Wellington and Abercrombie and Nelson fit into that, in a really remarkable way. Just really spectacular.
Yeah, Séverine is very much one of the ones to watch, in that sort of, well, I guess part of our generation, but sort of, in that sense that we've already graduated, and she's just sort of on the cusp of graduation. Severine's going to do some important work, and
she really
we're going to be
is
paying attention to it.
I mean, that 10-page paper, basically sort of in 10 pages was just like, if you read between the lines, it's basically like everything we know about the democratization of war and the 20th century memorialization movement and grief in war. All of that was on display 100 years before, just in a more private setting. And it can be drawn out in a really, really remarkable way. The other paper I want to highlight, and to be clear, right, the problem with CRE is that there is inevitably 3 panels every session that you want to go to, right? There's so many. And it was really hard sort of paring it down to 3. And there's no shade on any of the other ones that were there. There was some remarkable stuff. There's brand new scholarship. They even brought in, they folded in a little bit of like an LSU grad conference on not just the Revolutionary Era, but, everything else as well. People talking about, 20th century. There was a superb titled paper. I couldn't make it because I was actually chairing something at the time. It was on the history of the U.S. Army's K ration, and it was called the letter that fed the Army, which is just a perfect title. And I was kind of gutted to miss that one. But the third one I want to shout out is Sean Pollock, who's a professor at Wright State, and that is Pretending to Command: Representations of Prince Bagration in Leo Tolstoy's War and Peace, which was really just a showstopper in terms of how it was put together, how it was written. And, we don't fundamentally think of Tolstoy as a humorist, or even as a satirist, really, but he was one. And Pollock gave this incredible sort of close reading that just hammered home the sort of pseudo disdain that you can read through some of this work. So yeah, all 3 really fantastic, along with every other paper there. Really a spectacular conference. And then to finish everything off, after hours, we finish, dinners on your own. Alex and a bunch of others, as roped in a few others, we all hang out in the lounge upstairs and play board games. There's after hours gaming at CRE. And we've got, on one side, you've got the sort of hardcore 18th century, Prussian army heads doing like carving up Europe in the old school, very, war game. And then on the other, we have like a joking, very drunken 9 people playing a game about trying to get out of Bristol during the plague. It was so much fun. Just really highly recommended. And honestly, for grad students who are in this area and are considering a first conference, you could do a lot worse. You really could.
Okay, then. So that's the CRE conference. It is by no means the only conference, though, that is coming out this year. So hashtag ad, hashtag shameless plug. War and Peace 3 is incoming. No, this isn't a bizarre
the
sequel.
Tolstoy sequel.
Yeah,
We've all made that joke for so long.
I mean, I had it the first time round. So I did War and Peace 1 back in September 2019. Then War and Peace 2 got delayed because of the pandemic. Then it got kind of half cancelled because the Queen died in September 2022. And I had hoped we'd kind of had our kind of concerns over the health of members of the royal family. But of course, we released the CFP for War and Peace 3 and announced the date. And then within a very short space of time, it transpired that King Charles III is being treated for cancer. So I'm desperately hoping that we don't go through 2 British monarchs in the space of 3 conferences, because if we do, then frankly, I will probably end up at the Tower of London. But
are you the reason the wife of the heir has disappeared, Zach?
I can neither confirm nor deny. However, I would like to make clear that I am not the one who photoshopped that picture that everybody's got their knickers in a twist about, because shock horror, somebody edited a photo. I'm
just going to assume that you are the one having the affair with William.
Mate, how did you know? That was meant to be like top secret. But yes, in all seriousness, it's always a very sad state of affairs when somebody is unwell. There's a lot of speculation about quite what is and isn't going on behind the scenes, but I'm going to be completely frank with anybody who wants to peddle a conspiracy theory. The person who knows what's going on in their body is, funnily enough, Catherine, and not you sitting at your desk trying to psychoanalyze a photo that was taken for Mother's Day, and then sort of trying to see are there satanic symbols in the midst of it. People do, please, I beg you, get a grip. But this is the kind of nonsense.
No, it's not satanic symbols. It's not satanic symbols. That the Photoshop very clearly illustrates the title for the next Avengers movie.
I missed that one. I missed it. Clearly, I haven't been paying enough attention. Damn it.
I tell you.
So yes, back to War and Peace 3.
For the 3 listeners that are still here.
Yes, because everybody else has frankly lost the will to live. Can I just say, I've commissioned 3 of these and paid up front for them. So God knows what the viewing figures are going to be like at that point in time. But we shall see whether or not this.
I'm just looking forward to knowing I've made it, which is when you have an Apple podcast review that's like, great podcast. Would Luke just shut up already? That's when I know I've made it.
It's all right. I'll go and write one for you tonight, mate. Problem solved.
Cheers.
But yeah, War and Peace 3. So War and Peace 2 was organised by myself and NRWGC trustee Sam Jolly. And Sam returns as part of the organising committee this year, along with Graham Callister from York St John University. And York St John are going to be our hosts for this event, which we're very excited about. CFP is live. I will do a separate video, well, probably more likely an audio, but I might do a video because I'm going up to York at some point soon anyway. We shall see how that one goes. But either way, CFP is live. There'll be a separate release of that. If you want details, please check out the NRWGC's social media feeds on Twitter at NRWG Charity, same address on Facebook. It's one of those conferences that is not one of those we only take you if you got a PhD kind of conferences. Broadly speaking, I would say those have been pushed to the fringe anyway. In terms of that kind of academic snobbery, and that's been one of the positive developments of the last sort of 15, 20 years. But the bottom line is, if you've got something new and interesting to say and can back it up, we want to hear from you. Now, this was very much on display at War and Peace 2. Folks will have heard Liam Telfer quite recently on the show talking about reenacting. He was doing a really interesting paper that was looking at his day job is firefighting, and he was kind of looking at the burning down of Hougoumont through a kind of a firefighter's lens, and knowing what the body goes through in the midst of a fire and kind of trying to work out what implications that might have had on combat experience. Fascinating, really different. That's the kind of stuff we want. We don't care if you've not studied history since you were at school, provided you can bring something that's got an interesting angle that you can substantiate. If you need some help in terms of how to put a proposal together, and sure, some people do, they're not familiar with the format, please make use of the 250 or 300 words that we allow you to explain, why does this paper matter? What is it that you're going to be using to try and unpick this problem? Drop us a line. Charity contact details are on social media and on our website, www.nrwgc.com. So it's going to be a really fun, we're looking at 2 or 2.5 days up in York. Stunning city. We are literally going to be about a 10-minute walk from the Shambles, from York Minster, where you've got a lot of very nice Napoleonic memorials and colours and things like that. So there's going to be a lot on. I'm not going to give you any spoilers on who's speaking and what and all the rest of it. Tickets will go on sale probably late May, I would estimate. And what I would say to folks is that the ticket price will be heavily skewed in favour of people who have signed up to be a member, to the point where if you aren't a member, it will probably be more financially beneficial for you, if you're planning to attend, to sign up to become a member, because you'll save so much on conference tickets that actually it will cost less to buy the ticket and membership than it would to just buy a non-member's ticket, which is deeply scandalous. But we want you to join the cause. So why not? Because actually you're supporting an organization that's trying to do good work. And this is part of what we do. Education, facilitating people coming together and exchanging ideas. But then, of course, on top of that, we're doing the whole stuff with grave cleaning, grave restoration, and burials.
Hear, hear.
He says, having come back from Spain just before Christmas. Which was
Zack,
a big deal.
Zack, why don't you tell us what the deadline is for the call for papers, and what the dates of the actual conference are?
So the dates of the conference, I need to just bring up a calendar, because everything is brilliantly organized apart from me remembering when dates are. So we are looking at the end of the first week of September. Stop shaking your head, Reynolds. So it will be at least 2 days. So that will be Friday the 6th and Saturday the 7th of September. Mm-hmm. If we do a half day, we will tag the half day on the front of the conference. So the afternoon of Thursday the 5th. When does the CFP expire is a spectacular question that I don't have the answer.
I'm Sandra, and I'm just the professional your small business was looking for. But you didn't hire me because you didn't use LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn has professionals you can't find anywhere else, including those who aren't actively looking for a new job, but might be open to the perfect role, like me.
In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you'll miss out on great candidates like Sandra. Start hiring professionals like a professional. Post your free job on linkedin.com/spoken today.
Millions of people have lost weight with personalized plans from Noom, like Evan, who can't stand salads and still lost 50 pounds.
Salads generally for most people are the easy button, right? For me, that wasn't an option. I never really was a salad guy. That's just not who I am. But Noom worked for me.
Get your personalized plan today at Noom.com. Real Noom user compensated to provide their story. In 4 weeks, the typical Noom user can expect to lose 1 to 2 pounds per week. Individual results may vary.
At this point in time, because I'm brilliantly prepared for things like this, apparently. I note, however, that the secretary of the charity also can't recall when the CFP closes either. So although he's not
the CFP closes on the 19th of April 2024.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. That is appreciated. So, but yeah, seriously, folks, get in touch if you want to submit something. Obviously, if you want to attend, you are very welcome to. We will be looking at online as well as in-person attendance, and online and in-person speaking. So if you're in a far-flung corner of the world and you're kind of thinking, well, I don't really want to travel all the way to York for the sake of a 20-minute paper. We get it. It's worth it because part of the fun of conferences is the chats that happen afterwards.
Yeah,
but if you can't make it, we get that. But make the most of the opportunity to submit, because we live in a hybrid age, so we're embracing the opportunities that offers.
Very much another one of the great developments to come out of the past 5 years. Thanks largely to a pandemic that none of us particularly enjoyed. But that drive to bring this to a hybrid world, to drag academe kicking and screaming into the 21st century in terms of conferences, was a gift, frankly.
Yeah, but there was a lot of kicking and a lot of screaming along the way. It has to be admitted.
Yeah.
The other one I want to do a shout out for is the Wellington Congress. I think we're on the 8th Wellington Congress now. The first one was set up by Charles Esdale, I believe, with his then colleague at Southampton, Rory Muir. So talk about, two powerhouses.
Is it still together. Charles Woolgar these days?
Chris Woolgar.
Chris Woolgar,
who used to be my supervisor, but then retired in the midst of the pandemic. As he was still supervising me, Lord love him. I'm very
working with you will do that.
True. So I went through 3 supervisors in the space of 1 PhD.
So many jokes.
Look, keep it clean, Reynolds. For God's sake, man.
That's not that's not what I meant. I wasn't even thinking on the dirty side. Just like working with you, as I can now vouch for. What's that line from Topsy Turvy? This work with Gilbert is quite simply killing me. Working with Gilbert would kill anyone.
I'm not going to deign to dignify that with a response, quite frankly. Although it does seem that you don't want to be paid for the next instalment of this show, so that is duly noted. But yeah, in all seriousness, Wellington Congress, 8th Wellington Congress, will be not this year, but next year. It's usually done around Easter. So I think the plan is April-ish, 2025. Slightly longer CFP for this one. I believe it's late May that one closes. Luke is doing his job as assistant producer and finding the details for me whilst I fumble and fill time on the air. But the Wellington Congress is fantastic. It was actually, this is why I have so much love for the Wellington Congress. So I've done the 5th, 6th and 7th Congresses and will be at the 8th. But it was the Wellington Congresses that gave me my route in. If it wasn't for them, I wouldn't have even started. So 5th Wellington Congress, in one of the breaks, I showed a group project that I'd worked on as a second year undergrad that was kind of like a mockumentary on the Battle of Salamanca. This is where the Salamanca fixation comes from for me. Off the back of that, got talking to people like Charles Esdale and Rory Muir, which as a then third year was quite an astonishing thing. Then did a similar concept for Waterloo in 2015 when there was the 6th Wellington Congress, and then got talking to people like Ed Koss. And I think Ed Koss, Charles Esdale and Rory Muir went on a sort of 3-man crusade to persuade me that I could do a PhD. And the rest, as they say, is history.
So we have them to blame.
That's look, you've just stolen my joke. Wait for the punchline, man, for God's sake. Yes. Any complaints, please write too.
Oh my God.
the said esteemed professors, and blame them for probably the only significant mistake they made when it comes to encouraging young inverted commas talent, because clearly when it came to this one, they dropped the ball. But yeah, the Wellington Congresses are a fantastic event. They're held at Southampton University in the UK. Periodically, there isn't like a set rota for them. Details you can find just by Googling Wellington Congress. It's being run by the Archive Department at Southampton University, which is the home of the Wellington Papers. Dr. Karen Robson is the head of archives there, so she will be in charge of the organisation. She always does a fantastic job. And the Wellington Papers are one of the important collections for people who want to study this particular period of history from the British perspective. So if
Hear,
you're
hear.
not familiar with them already, go Google them. They've got an online catalogue that is very easy to work with. And the team are genuinely absolutely fantastic. Some of the nicest archivists I've ever had the privilege to work with. Very generous with their time, very knowledgeable, exceptionally helpful. Just make sure that you book in advance.
Yeah. So the call for papers for that is due Friday, the 31st of May, 2024. Should be submitted. There's no fancy Google sheet or anything like that. It's just email it to archives at soton.ac.uk. Well worth it. Great resources, great place. And honestly, an extra shout out to the team there. They were instrumental in us running Waterloo Live for the NRWGC last June. Which was great fun. And if you want to see three men disappointingly not go mad live on camera, but actually just have a great time, that's all available.
We got close. Don't lie to people.
Close. I think my favorite part of that is you and I slowly going nuts, and Liam, who had started it, was sort of like this worry that he's in a room with two academics and he was going to be the sort of the slow horse, sort of looking at these two giggling idiots going, what the hell is going on? And what have I gotten myself into?
The professionals were not overly professional that day.
No, they were not.
In our defense, we streamed for 12 hours straight. So
indeed. And it's all available on the NRWGC YouTube, is it not, Zach?
It is indeed. It is still up. At some point, I will get round to releasing all of the individual segments, because there are a whole bunch of interviews that we did prior to that that are there as they're uploaded already, but I haven't released them yet because time.
Yeah.
There's a lot I do, all right? Just pity me.
Yeah.
Pity
No,
me.
absolutely. If you are interested in the sort of segments that we did and you don't want to wait through the whole video, you can find my sort of 3 minutes on Napoleon's horse Marengo, and I put that in quotes because there's a whole debate about whether he was in fact Napoleon's horse, on all of my social media. So dig it out there and you can take a look.
Fantastic. Right. We are not ending this broadcast anytime soon, which is going
No, we really are not.
Cause considerable concern for our listeners, but we do need to move on. And the next thing I want to focus on is this. So this is great for a radio show, but this is Love and Marriage.
Oh, you're mirrored. Excellent.
Yes, I know. I swear I resolved that before coming on air, but apparently not. So Rory Muir has a new book out, and I'm going to declare my biases at the start of this. I consider Rory Muir to be one of the standout giants of the current age of researchers in this field. But of late, Rory has moved away from he started out as political historian of the period, looking at the British government's kind of machinations around the war with Napoleon, then went very military with books like Tactics and the Experience of Battle in the Age of Napoleon, his study of the Battle of Salamanca 1812, which is frankly the blueprint on how to write a decent battlefield study. Then he did his 2-volume biography of Wellington, and now he's gone very social. So his last book was Gentlemen of Uncertain Fortune, which looked at basically the lives of second sons, people who aren't destined to inherit, but instead were the ones who kind of went into the army, clergy, navy, etc., and looked at what their lives entailed. And now he has looked at, well, put it this way, somebody on the dust jacket says that he's shone new light on a subject that we thought we knew everything about, but didn't. That is Paula Byrne, author of The Real Jane Austen, speaking there. So they're not even my words. So it's been very well received already. It's a classic Rory publication in that it's a really interesting topic and it's ridiculously well researched. I think it's physically impossible for Rory to do history badly. Exceptionally clearly written and engagingly written. I will read a couple of excerpts because I think then you'll get a sense of the dry wit with which Rory writes. But Luke, do you want to say a few words on your thoughts about the title first? Yeah,
I do. So first of all, I do want to highlight. I mean, I share Zach's admiration of Rory. I will also add the man, as Zack's stories from the Wellington Congress will emphasize. I have yet to meet a senior scholar who is more generous with his time and his platform for boosting young scholarship. The man is remarkable. And I'm not biased at all that he was the first person to ever review my book in a publication and gave it a very glowing review. But I did sort of want to say, sort of, the man's remarkable. The book is superb, and I've got some nice things to say about it in a second. But I do also want to highlight sort of, while we're picking this book up, there are dozens of books worthy of our attention that come out every year, right? There's not enough time in our calendars to talk about this. So I do want to posit two reasons why we are selecting this one. Number one, it's because Zack is in the acknowledgements. And number two...
You get. I will neither confirm nor deny the veracity of that statement, but I will say you get.
And number two, it's because he is trying to send his female listeners a subtle hint that he's ready to settle down.
Is it really that obvious?
It is, I'm afraid.
Can I also just say, what female listeners?
I mean, valid.
You should know these stats better. It's like 98% male, the listenership of this podcast.
Yeah, and the one woman is Beatrice, and she's out of your league and married happily. So, that's completely valid. But it is a truth. It is a truth universally acknowledged that the man in possession of a good podcast must be in want of a wife.
That is a stellar line. That's going to go in some kind of reel. Quite frankly.
Excellent. I look forward to it.
Assistant producer.
1 minute
so
and 9 seconds.
Snip that.
Okay. Yes, but I think the wider point remains, and I think Rory would also be the first to say, like, look, there's a dozen of these books every year that are worth talking about. So please do not assume that just because we were talking about Rory's book, it's the only one you need to read right now. Now, that said, this is cultural history at its finest. It is the perfect blend of cultural and social history. It's a masterpiece. There's two things I want to pick out of here. Number one, I adore Rory's emphasis. I've actually never met the man. Professor Muir's emphasis on novels.
He's not actually a professor, and he is. I know, and he is so humble and demure about this, because I completely agree with you. I refer to this guy as the godfather of Napoleonic history, but not in like the sinister mafia style godfather. Just like genuinely, he's like your favorite uncle, but not in a sort of problematic Prince Andrew style of an uncle.
No, more in like the Terry Pratchett vein. Yeah. I have to highlight the fact that you use the term demure, given that we were talking about Rory Muir, and there's so many puns in there.
I would love to pretend that was deliberate, but
I know.
We both know that I'm not that good a wordsmith.
Indeed. But I will, so to continue, right, his emphasis on novels, not only as sources, which is a relatively old school thing, although it's something, again, that in the past 10 years has become much more respectable, but also on their influence on the people, right? There's a quote at the end that says, sort of novels had a much greater influence on shaping assumptions and expectations about marriage than explicitly didactic works did. Right? The people of this age, we can get a great idea about how they viewed marriage from reading Austen and Disraeli and, all the others, Thackeray and Dickens, and the name that I'm reaching for that is gone. But also that the books shaped people's views. It's not just that they're showing people's views, it's that they're shaping them. It is a two-way street. And Rory does a superb job of reading into that and plucking that out. All while being...
And that is a that is a development that's come from what academics would refer to as interdisciplinarity, i.e. that greater conversation between, for example, in this context, history scholars and English scholars about themes, and being willing to exchange those ideas rather than sort of sitting within our little silos of I do history and, I'm not going to talk to the people who do another subject because, what have I got to learn from them? And actually, by having these conversations, we actually get this much more holistic appreciation of what's going on across society. And fundamentally, historians are about telling the stories of societies. That's sort of what we do. So, this is one of those developments that has been really positive.
Absolutely. The other thing I want to really highlight is, he mentions that sort of in the foreword, that his last book was Gentlemen of Uncertain Fortune, and that was by definition a work about men, right? And that this, in many ways, is an effort to sort of explore broader, to bring in women as well. But one of my favorite lines in this book, and it's simple and it's perfect and it's dead on Rory, but it's one that a lot of sort of history snobs and old school historians might forget, is very simply, quote, "Men as well as women read novels." Right? This is about both sides. It's about expanding. And he's so good at not only superb research and all of this, but also acknowledging the faults. He openly says there's not enough sources to write this level of book on non-traditional relationships, those that stayed single for their entire lives, those that were homosexual, asexual, those that ended up, in the immortal words of the tropes of historians that are quite rightly made fun of, just good friends. Yes, they're buried holding each other, but they're clearly just good friends. And we don't understand the language of friendship in the 19th century. I swear. Am I actually allowed to curse on this, Zach, or are we trying to keep it?
If you want to.
All right. Newsflash, people. They were fucking. All right. Thank you.
He took a wrecking ball to that profanity filter, didn't they?
Yeah, pretty much. That's my only one. Like it's a time-honored tradition that in American cinema, PG-13 movies are allowed one use of that word, and there is my one use of that word.
Okay,
but yeah,
we'll establish a quota for you. Otherwise, there'll be a swear jar, and you'll
that's very fair.
Dividends.
Oh God. And the other thing I just want to say, and it's very palpable, right? It's dedicated to his wife. This is a love letter to marriage in certain ways, right? It is a love letter to sort of the modern definition of marriage, not as a purely social way to unite houses and unite wealth, but as a way to find someone to be your equal and your helpmeet throughout your lives. And he makes a very compelling case that sort of it was these novels that in part helped drive that idea into the social consciousness.
Absolutely. But what I also admire about this book is that it's not a sort of rose-tinted perspective, because there is an entire chapter actually dedicated to domestic violence. He also covers adultery, divorce, and separation in there. I've had various quotes that I've pulled out of it. I won't read the ones relating to domestic violence. But respect to the guy for being willing to tackle that. It would have been very easy to have just skirted around that topic. And it takes a bold scholar to face these things head on. And as somebody who tries to do a lot of work on the history of sexual violence in conflict zones, I deeply respect that willingness, and I think there is a need for. There are already great developments in that field, but I think there's a need to continue to push that work. But
and also all credit to Yale for not trying to pull that out, because it probably would have sold a little better without that part as sort of a rose tinted. But Rory has worked with Yale for years now, several books, and they clearly trust him. There's a good, all his books. There's a trust there that I think that shows. Sorry, please, Zach,
It
continue.
certainly is. No, by all means. So this is a lengthy quote. It's almost the entirety, in fact, of page 7. But it gives you a very good sense of the dry wit that underpins Rory's research and his ability to just weave these stories very delicately. And it does, funnily enough, involve our boy Arthur in a long-winded way. So here he's talking about young men and how some liaisons might have been sort of a little bit less than romantic in nature. He writes, young men might also gain sexual experience in these years, whether from prostitutes, landladies' daughters, shop girls, or a regularly established mistress. Not all did so, and for some, those who did it was a matter of furtive and unsatisfying fumbling in alleyways or squalid rooms that left them conscience-stricken and possibly with a nasty venereal infection. Others spent a few years indulging in drinking, whoring, and gambling to the full extent that their pay or their allowance, their credit, their friends, and their health would permit. When Thomas Fremantle, a naval officer in his early 20s, spent a year in London with his brother Jack in 1788, he described his life in letters to their younger brother William. And this is a quote here. We spend our time much in the same way as when I wrote you last. Jack and a party of us gave a whore's ball at the barracks a few nights ago. I was, as you may imagine, much diverted and entertained. They danced better than any modest woman I ever saw. We were just 10 complete couple and kept it up till very late. No dirty jokes there, please. Jack goes on just as he used to. That is to say, living fast, but I cannot say I am a bit better. Neither do I think it possible to live regular in this precious town. I confess I feel more for him than for myself, as my constitution, etc., is in much better repair. So that's the end of the quote. And then Rory continues, and a little later he reported, I am now in possession of the girl I mentioned I was so much in love with. She is kept in great style by a damned fool, and I now contrive to have as much pleasant fucking as I can lay my sides to without it costing me a farthing. Who says that romance is dead? A couple of years later, the recipient of these letters, William Fremantle, together with his friend Arthur Wesley, the future Duke of Wellington, was fined £10 and bound over to keep the peace after a brawl in what was probably a Dublin brothel. And what I find particularly interesting there is the hypocrisy of our Arthur, who many years later, whilst in the peninsula, has to review a court-martial case of a young officer who's found running through the streets of Lisbon with his sword drawn, that is not a euphemism, I hasten to add, waving it around, again, not a euphemism, and generally making a fuss and disturbing the peace. And so he's arrested, tried by the court, and eventually honourably acquitted. However, Wellington intervenes and says, well, you can't honourably acquit him. He was in a brothel. There's nothing honourable in that circumstance. Conveniently ignoring, of course, his earlier life. So that gives you an indication of Rory's dry wit, the ability to just pull and weave these different threads together, and generally make a book that is deeply entertaining, but also hugely informative in the process.
Hear, hear. And to hell with Wellington having just been to a brothel. I mean, the man is talking about, honor while his wife is languishing in London, and he's going through a slew of mistresses.
Did he go through mistresses during the Peninsular War? I think the jury's out because there was the
jury. No, that is fair. The jury is out on that. And in fairness, the man was busy. But
he was genuinely too busy for that kind of stuff. That's unlike, for example, Massena. But there were certainly allegations. So including allegations with his washerwoman, I believe. I mean,
in fairness, in defense of Massena, the legend is that his mistress had made up immaculate versions of the uniforms of the troops he commanded in her size, like skin tight Hussars uniforms. And I swear to God, man, marry her. Sorry.
There you go. wisdom from the young scholar in residence here, Dr. Luke Reynolds, who is sporting a rather fetching cravat for it. I've never seen him wear a cravat before, but as soon as he knew that I was doing a video of this, he pulls out the cravat.
You asked me to class up the joint. That's what I'm doing.
Oh, charming. Thank you so much. I swear down this guy, seriously. If this content lasts more than 3 months, it will be an achievement. So yes, that's Rory.
Here.
And Love and Marriage in the Age of Jane Austen, available from Yale University Press. Folks, go get it. It's maybe 25, 30 quid.
It's $30. So yeah, I think about £25. And please do not assume that just because it has Jane Austen in the title, it's not worthy scholarship.
Indeed. Next up on our agenda was going to be kind of research stuff, but with one eye on the time, I don't think we can subject our listeners to the entirety of that. So instead, we are going to skip me, because let's be honest, who wants to hear me waffle on anyway? Stop nodding, Reynolds, and smirking at the camera. So we will skip that. And instead, we are going to have a look at some of the productions that have come out. Now, some of these are quite enjoyable, and others of them are utterly ridiculous. We will start with the laughable but enjoyable, which is the Dick Turpin trailer, which I believe is it Sky TV or Apple TV that's doing this?
It's Apple TV over here. I don't know what it is in the UK. Yeah, we can watch the trailer. I should say I've seen the first episode of this, so I can provide a detailed opinion.
Okay, so all I've seen is the trailer, which is really quite funny. I mean, the challenge I have is I keep wanting to call this the Dick Whittington trailer, which says a lot about how many pantomimes I went to as a child. Please, folks, no jokes about how the best years of my life. I rather like a pantomime in that they are behind me. But I mean, I do have a bit of an issue with the whole Dick Whittington thing, in that what moron decided to pretend that the streets of London... I know I'm having an aneurysm here and I don't even care. What moron decided to pretend that the streets of London were paved with gold? Because the only covering on offer when you visit London, quite frankly, is a layer of soot on the inside of your lungs from all of the pollution. Now, I do get that it's like a parable about like expectation management and the grass always being greener. But even so, just pick somewhere a little bit nicer when it comes to dirt and grime, like Boston Harbour, judging by what Luke has just said. There are better places that you could have picked. But yes, this is the Dick Turpin, not the Dick Whittington trailer, which is available through Apple TV. Let's take a look.
I know what you're thinking. Who is this guy with the incredible cheekbones? Where does he get his hair done? One day, I'll be the most famous highwayman in all of England.
You are literally about to be hanged, you idiot!
Quick note to my gang. If you were planning a rescue, now would be a good time.
You've probably heard of me. Dick Turpin, new leader of the Essex gang.
Highwayman murder and rob. You're not a highwayman, Dick.
I've got this. We strike on 3. 1, 2. We'll get the next one.
I've seen you prancing around in your funny shirts.
I'm new school, and there's going to be less violence on my watch. Is there anything that I could have done to improve your highway robbery experience?
But we're just as tough as any other gang in here.
Here's your peppermint tea, Dick. Put a splash of honey in it. I know you got a scratchy throat.
Thanks, little carrot. There's only one man brainless enough to steal from the syndicate.
Thank you, Dick. I don't know what we do without you.
Gonna be famous.
Dick Turpin!
Dick Turpin.
Dick Turpin.
Dick Turpin.
Dick Turpin.
I want this dick in my hands as soon as possible.
That sounds weird.
Yeah, that did sound a bit weird, sorry.
So there you have it, the Dick Turpin trailer. Looking funny, but why does this win? I promised that I wouldn't. Well, no, I didn't actually promise that I wouldn't go down the Napoleon movie route, did I? But I'm going to cover the Napoleon movie just tangentially. Yes, stop rolling your eyes, man. In that, this works because it's not taking itself too seriously. It even says, this is made up. And it's fine because of that. It's not about the historical accuracy. I've just discovered that actually the streaming platform seems to do a thumbs up thing when I do a thumbs up. That's very odd. Luke is now trialing this himself without the same results, which perhaps indicates that the streaming platform doesn't like you, assistant producer. It prefers me.
So it is. So it will be.
But mind you, I'm the one who pays the bill for it, so it probably is contractually obliged to like me more. It's not taking itself too seriously. That's good in my book, and that gives you more latitude to play around with the concept, right? And in doing so, what it means is it completely disarms anybody who's going to start going, "Oh, well, that's not historically accurate." No, of course it's not historically accurate. You can see it's a comedy. And I think this is the point, that actually everybody going, "Oh, you historians, you don't understand the concept of entertainment." No, hang on. We absolutely do. It's just about how you choose to frame it and the difference in genre. And because of the acknowledgement of that difference, actually, you're going to get a much more positive response out of people like me, for one, because it looks good. The costumes, I'm sure the costumes aren't historically accurate, but who cares? The costumes look good. You get this nice kind of flavor of the period. You've got some very high profile individuals there. Hugh Bonneville starring. I don't know the context. So, it's got some good people behind it, but you've seen episode 1. So tell us more.
Yeah, no, I mean, the cast is incredible. Hugh Bonneville plays the thief taker general, basically. And Fielding plays Dick Turpin himself. And you're right, it doesn't take itself seriously. And in fact, the sort of overall framing narrative is that he's telling his story, but what we're seeing on screen is being run not through what he's saying, but through the mind and pen of a true crime author who is interviewing him and jotting all this down and inflating everything. My problem with this, and it will to a certain extent undercut everything Zack has just said, is that yes, the talent is incredible. You've got half the team behind Horrible Histories and the Paddington series guest starring in this one way or another. The jokes almost all rely on that old trope of, oh, the people in the past are different, so if we put together things that are current with that, it's going to be funny. It's that amusing juxtaposition, and I'm using in scare quotes, of modern ideas / tropes with the period. Now, to a certain extent, that works great. Like the true crime author is as a framing device is a hilarious touch. But Fielding's Turpin is a vegan, and that's why he doesn't want to be a butcher. It's sort of that it's back and forth, and while yes, the costumes some of them are fine, the soldiers and the nobles are decent, everyday people look good, there's a joke in there about how he dresses one of his gang members in pleather, and he explains it it's plastic leather, it looks good, it's shiny, it wipes clean, and you're just there's better options here, guys. It feels like they went a little bit too much for the low-hanging fruit.
Okay. I did wonder that with the Bonneville quote at the end there, "I want this dick in my hand immediately," which I should not have said out loud, because actually that is snippable. And,
yes, it is.
And that's a dangerous precedent that I've just said. And of course, I've compounded that by drawing our viewers' attention to the fact that that is snippable. Which was not the smartest of moves. But yeah, I did have a slight...
There's a terrible circumcision joke in there.
Look, you were meant to raise the quality of this show.
Oh, shit. Sorry, I misread my contract. Yeah, and honestly, look, British comedy has made some of the greatest things of all time based on dick jokes, right? There's that entire bit in Blackadder the Fourth with Rick Mayall as the Baron von Richthofen about how lucky the English are to find the toilet so amusing. For us, it is a mundane and functional item. For you, the basis of an entire culture. And Blackadder is a work of genius, right? Again, something every historian will agree on. It's just what I wanted this to be was Our Flag Means Death. And it's not. It's not quite there, and it's disappointing. And while the talent carries it, I think I'd rather just watch Fielding host Bake Off.
Okay. So that's fair. So promises more than it actually delivers, I guess.
I think that's fair. Look, if you want
with Good Omens, I don't know if which caused a lot of controversy over in the States, of course, in the Bible Belt. But I felt vast potential, and yet some of the jokes were just a tad obvious, and kind of that low hanging fruit that you may disagree, but that was my kind of feel, to the point where I haven't seen Good Omens 2. And actually, it was kind of carried by it's Michael Sheen, isn't it, and David Tennant.
Michael Sheen and David Tennant. Look, Good Omens is a truly charming romantic comedy between the two of them. That's what it is, and that's how you have to watch it. And if you watch it with that in mind, it becomes something relatively special. But yeah, I mean, look, if you read the book, just read the book, and then read everything else that Terry Pratchett has ever written. Sorry, I'm biased here. But yeah, it's just. If you're in the mood for something silly, if you wanna have some fun, there is a good moment where one of the gang is trying to shoot a rope and fires, and the musket ball instead kills a pigeon above the rope that falls to the ground, and everyone sort of stares at it. And there's just this moment of, yeah, they do that sometimes. You're like, yeah, okay, fair enough. Someone actually understands that sometimes these things are not the most accurate. But look, if you want something pseudo in this period, admittedly a little bit later, that is absolutely hilarious, just watch Blackadder the Third.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's slightly damning. It's about to get even more damning with this blind reaction that we've got incoming now. So this is not an Apple TV production. This is from a YouTube producer called Next Lust. Thank you to Marcus Cribb for bringing this to my attention. And I think this is basically a parable on the perils of AI. And I should say that Luke has not seen this one.
I have
so
not.
Whatever you see the contortions of his face do are a genuine blind reaction to this. So buckle up. This is something, it's named something sort of clickbaity, like crazy facts about. And this is from, as I say, Next Lust on YouTube.
At an 1815 waters undulating terrain hosted a historic clash. Napoleon, envisioning European dominance, faced Wellington's allied forces. Cannons thundered and soldiers engaged in the brutal dance of war. Victory wavered until Prussian reinforcements arrived, tilting the scales. Waterloo resonated with the weight of history as Napoleon met defeat, signaling the end of his era. One crazy fact about this battle is that Marshal Ney mistakenly charged on horseback, thinking the British were retreating. Realizing his error, he exclaimed, "Come and see how a Marshal of France dies on the field of battle."
So, yeah, that was whatever the hell that was. Your face was priceless throughout that, I have to say. I mean, come and see how a Marshal of France meets his death is the actual quote. And it was not the cavalry charges, it was the final infantry assault, to which he supposedly said that. But I think we might be missing the wood for the trees in those comments, like waters and Waterloo.
Thank you. That
was the Australian outback. So, I mean, that's an easy enough mistake to make. I do love the idea of the French charring along to the Allied lines. I mean, at least that's consistent with his comment about like the Allies and the French engaging in that brutal dance. So there's like an allegory that's going on there. I'm clutching at straws here.
This hurts. This really hurts. So yeah, the water to start with. I thought it was about Trafalgar for a second there, and then sort of kept going. 200 years of uniforms in 30 seconds, on and off, including a pirate at one point.
Oh, there's more than that. So I saw World War II, English Civil War, and 18th century uniforms. There was an 18th century uniform in the colours of the French flag in there, which I respected, not from a historical accuracy perspective, but just the concept. But yeah, you had, I'm pretty sure, English Civil War helmets in there. You had like Wellington as a World War II, like Wellington meets Monty, but without the moustache. That was going on.
Oh no. Yeah, no, this is bad. This is really painful.
I mean, in fairness to Next Lust, the content creator behind this,
are you saying
some of the content...
Next Lust, Lust?
Yes, that is indeed the name of said channel.
But that's false advertising. Nothing in there promoted lust. Current or next.
I think you might be thinking a little bit too deeply about this, my friend.
That is a worse bit of false advertising than describing me as a scholar in residence.
It has come full circle. What I will say, because we should endeavour to be kind where we can, is that some of the content produced by that channel is actually okay. Historically, it's pretty kind of decent, albeit kind of surface level, and it is actually fact-based. But this one was an absolute monstrosity. If you're listening to the podcast version of this, we will snip this segment and stick it on YouTube so that you can have a little look for yourself at what we've just seen, because the visuals are something else. Never mind the audio. But yeah, I'm not sure that I need to worry about AI taking my job anytime soon. But what I will say is that, that got 4,000 views. So, maybe it's me that's the bot. And maybe I've been getting it all wrong. And really, I should be referring to it as Wateroo.
Wateroo. Oh, my God. Oh, man. Now, oh, God, that's painful. That is so painful.
But let us salvage the ashes of this broadcast with something that has literally just dropped. So this is hot off the press. I haven't seen this yet. I've got to say, I am trusting in Reynolds here and going into this blind, which is a very dangerous game to
Admittedly,
play.
yes.
But this is the Franklin trailer. Again, I believe this is Apple TV.
It is, yeah.
Responsible for this. So let's see what the two of us make of this.
You are... I am Benjamin Franklin. The Congress has sent me here as a representative of the United States to enlist France in our war against England. America requires men, money, and arms. Without your aid, the United States will end before it has begun.
Grandfather, how long must we stay?
Until we win France to our side, or we are hanged.
Is there a third choice?
Diplomacy must never be a siege, but a seduction.
We both know you have trouble.
You're up to something.
I am plotting to deliver ships to the United States.
No, you're up to something else.
We have made an offer.
Beware the Frenchman's promise.
Is everything all right?
Possibly not.
Someone is spying on us.
Be careful. France has nothing to gain joining with America. The British will defeat you. It may cost us, but it will cost you more.
If the price is our lives, we'll pay it. I don't know who I can trust. I'm here to help my country. But time is running out.
Who are you really?
You are what the role requires you to be.
This is a dangerous game.
That's just the sort of game I like.
Okay. Incidentally, I will take the subscribe now as a good opportunity to remind people to review this podcast wherever you get your podcasts. And if you're watching on YouTube, please do remember to like and subscribe. But shameless advertising aside, I have mixed thoughts on this. So the way that trailer is edited makes me very mindful, perhaps unsurprisingly, of the Napoleon movie, because Apple, they've hosted the Napoleon, if the extended version ever sees the light of day, that's out on Apple, from what I understand, and
the regular version is now on Apple as well.
Okay. Everything from kind of fonts to the way it's cut seems kind of that way, very serious in nature. Perhaps understandable given the nature of the topic. I'm quite pleased to see Franklin get some attention. You know, if you wanted to do an American War of Independence thing, your obvious kind of basic move is, oh, look, Washington, right? And that's not what they've gone with. So that's encouraging. Because of what I'm used to when it comes to the Napoleon thing, I'm not getting my hopes up too high, but from my, granted, not extensive knowledge of the life of Benjamin Franklin, there's a lot in there that encourages me. It doesn't entirely seem to be sort of all hail Benjamin Franklin. There are some nice little nods in there to things like printing press and his work as a printer. So, you know, some nice things there. Very clear indications of how perilous the situation was for the fledgling United States. They absolutely needed the French government. And from what I understand, Franklin was integral in securing that support, albeit that ultimately led to the French Revolution and then gave the likes of you and me plenty to talk about subsequently. So yeah, let me get your take on this, particularly given that you're more steeped in the history of this, given its relevance to events on your side of the Atlantic than I perhaps am.
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing that we have to remind ourselves of is, yes, you know, America needed France, but yeah, for the in the immortal words of Hamilton, the guns and ships, but also really to make this a global conflict and to pull Britain's focus away from the 13 colonies and basically be like, hey, what would you like? Would you like the 13 colonies? Would you like Gibraltar? Would you like the Caribbean? Would you like India? What do you want? You can't have all of them. But at the same time, right, America has a very tricky thing on their hands here because they have to convince a conservative absolutist imperial power to support a colony's rebellion against a conservative, slightly less absolutist imperial power. And basically they have got to do this. They've got to say this basically is, you know, look, you can do this without it spreading, without it catching. Obviously it does in the end, although not in the way France expects, right? France at the beginning is really worried about, Martinique going up, that sort of thing. And instead it's Paris itself that goes up. So yeah, it's a very perilous situation. I think it captures just how much of a celebrity he was, and he genuinely was. I think my favorite utterly ridiculous moment in that trailer is this is a very dangerous game, and then the chess piece, and I'm just like, really? All right, sure. It looks lush. The costumes look decent. They seem to have gotten everything relatively right on that front. My hope, my worry is that they're going to. Franklin was a horn dog. He was a horny old man, and he lived that life. And that was a crucial part of sort of his diplomatic style. And they really, I really hope they bring that out. There is that one moment at the end of him sort of stripping off his coat and jumping in. And I just hope they acknowledge that because this is not, this is a very different story from, say, HBO's John Adams. Like, Adams and his wife Abigail had a marriage for the ages. Their letters are incredible to each other, and he sought her advice, she sought his advice. Franklin wasn't like that. Franklin was a little bit of a player, and I hope that they sort of hammer that home. But I am exactly. This is the man who once famously wrote that all cats are gray in the dark, right? I think Douglas is good casting.
Yes, I agree.
I'm looking forward to that.
Both in terms of the physicality as well as the character.
Yes.
And that was one of the complaints, wasn't it, about all of the, frankly, less significant complaints about Napoleon, was that people kind of looked at Joaquin Phoenix and went, does this work? Actually, I would say the casting here absolutely does work, which is really encouraging. He does look the part.
And you've got a supporting cast. I'm just looking at this. Eddie Marsan plays John Adams, which is an interesting piece. Ludivine Sagnier is in here as Madame Briand. Looks like a very good cast of almost exclusively actually French actors, which is a nice touch. And getting that right. Yeah.
Okey-doke. So something for us to perhaps look forward to. I don't know if you picked up when it's out for everybody to enjoy.
Let me find out. April 12th.
April 12th. So not long to wait.
No.
If there's more that drops before then maybe we'll see what we can do for folks in terms of news and details and all the rest of it. But kind of cautious optimism, I think that.
Mm-hmm.
But having watched the Napoleon movie, there isn't giddy optimism from us, given what we are used to. Folks,
it's certainly better than the other video we watched.
Well, yes, but low bars.
Fair, very valid.
Folks, that is going to wrap up this State of the Union of Napoleonic History address. It wasn't much of an address, really. It was more kind of a back and forth between two people who sound like they've been on the port. Nonetheless, I hope you've enjoyed this new form of content. Please do comment, because I will be paying some very close attention to the engagement on this to see what we need to snip and how we can adapt it for people's interests. If you have any questions, we will in the future do kind of responses to viewers' questions. So drop them in the comments. Remember to whack that like button and subscribe. But until next time, I have been Zack White.
And I have been Luke Reynolds.
The scholar in residence.
Thank
you very much for watching, folks.
And
stay
listening.
well, stay safe. And as always, thank you for listening. Folks, you know the drill by now. If you're new here, remember to hit that subscribe button so that you can find your way back. And if you're loving the show, remember to leave a review. It makes a vast amount of difference in terms of helping this show to reach a wider audience. Much love to all of my Patreon supporters who hopefully are going to start enjoying some slightly different elements of the perk package. Shout outs to my mentioned in Dispatches patrons: Rob Griffith, Brendan Teeling, Beatrice de Graaf, Lynn Dawson, Lucy Tatner, Jim Deary, Josh Keeney, Colin Fieldhouse, Stephen Colson, Jim Getz, Stephen Gillen, Hugh Brennan, Alistair Campbell-Grieve, Andy Meakin, Mark Anscombe, Rob Coughlin, Bruins Girl, Noah Fink, Mark Trowbridge, Miles Reedy, Nick Overland, Graham Goodwin, Chris Pramas, Anthony Gumbau, Anonymous American, Martin Pisani, Ulrich Decado, James Flueck, Roger O'Donnell, Natasha Hobday, Rod Schwager, Chris Kimball, Gary Dennis, David Graylick, Ted Andrews, David Malinsky, Richard Anderson, Arthur Forgy, Sam Moore, Wyatt Pollock, Carol Dixon Smith, Roland Shark, Jason Moran, and Mark Chestnut. And the Admirals: John Haynes, Ryan Diamond, JC Kaiser, Bob Burnham, Mike Guest, Liam Telfer, Todd and Led Campbell, Graham Swidenbank, Rachel Stark, Mark Duckers, David Maxwell, David Priest, Graham Callister, Sean Sullivan, Stephen Ashworth, Dan Hazelwood, Kate Walcombe, Steve Carter, Clemens Beman, Charles McKay, Reto the Sci-Fi Fan, and Tim Day. I'll be back very soon, but until then, I'm Zack White. This has been the Napoleonic Wars Pod. Take care of yourselves, my friends. Stay well, stay safe, and as always, thank you for listening.
Even on a budget, quality is non-negotiable. That's why Quince is the place to score high-end essentials at 50 to 80% less than similar brands. Get your hands on buttery soft cashmere sweaters from just $60, Italian leather jackets, and so much more. And the best part about Quince, they exclusively partner with factories committed to safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing. Elevate your style without the elevated price tag with Quince. Go to quince.com/upgrade for free shipping and 365-day returns.
Hi, I'm Daniel, founder of Pretty Litter. Did you know cats tend to hide symptoms of sickness and pain? I learned this the hard way after losing my cat, Gingy. So I created Pretty Litter, a health monitoring litter that helps detect early signs of illness by changing colors, saving you money and potentially your cat's life. Pretty Litter is veterinarian developed, and it's the easiest way to keep tabs on your fur baby's health right at home.
Go to prettylitter.com and use code ACAST for 20% off your first order and a free cat toy. Terms and conditions apply. See site for details.